dear to my heart. And I'm going to try to get all of your questions and comments incorporated right into the panel during the panel. And how I do that is I use Twitter. So if any of you guys have Twitter, feel free to tweet me anytime at Genese Davis during the panel. So for example, if Frank is saying something that you really want to hear more about, you want him to extrapolate on something, or JJ or Darold, just tweet me anytime and I will incorporate your voice or your questions or your comments right into the flow of the panel. Now, if you're not a fan of Twitter, that's totally okay. You could wait until the end of the panel. We always do the classic raise your hand Q&A style, the last 10 minutes or so. But I know how it feels to have a burning question, right? Like sometimes you have a really important question and you want to ask it. So I offer that way so that you have multiple choices to be a part of it. So we'll start with introductions. I'm Genese. I'm a host for Wizard World and for San Diego Comic-Con. I also do book conventions and video game expos. I'm an author of a thriller about a woman going head-to-head with a hacker. A lot of cool video game themes in Holder's Dominion. And then I also write sci-fi novels for a movie company in LA called Benaroya Pictures, which is new. Darold, you don't know that. I haven't got a chance to tell you about that great news.
Cool.
And a fantasy novel too for now, just recently, about a month ago, I got a contract to write a fantasy series for Pop Life. They're this huge toy company. So lots of writing. I also recently, Darold, I forgot to, see, Darold and I go way back. And Frank, you've done panels with me. JJ's the only only newbie up here. But I wanted to tell both of you guys, I got a recent video game gig. I write dialogue for Spearhead Games in Canada from LA. So I'm writing their lore, their backstory, their character development, their dialogue. So I'm really excited to share that with you if you're interested in the writing part of video games. I also host a video game podcast called The Gamers Dominion, which is produced by Assembly of Geeks. So I really hope you check that out as well. Frank, can you tell everybody about who you are and what you do? And these mics are super quiet, so super close.
Hi everyone, I'm Frank Marquart. I'm an artist at Deep Silver Volition. Volition is best known for the franchise Saints Row. We've also done Red Faction. If you go a little bit further back, we've done Punisher and Summoner. And our latest game is Agents of Mayhem. I've worked in the art department there for about 18 years in a variety of different roles. Started as an environment artist. I worked as an art director. Last game, Agents of Mayhem, I was a cinematic artist on that project. I've been there a while. I've worked with a number of different disciplines, and so I've seen quite a bit.
Round of applause for Frank.
Hi there, I'm JJ Bakken, and I work at wargaming.net. We make World of Tanks, and oh man, some fans, excellent. So Darold and I both work at Wargaming, and we work in Chicago at the branch that makes specifically the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and Xbox 360 versions. We also have PC and mobile and the whole, all the things. If it's got a screen, you can play World of Tanks on it. I work in the production department there, and I also teach introduction to video games at DePaul University downtown.
That is awesome. Round of applause for JJ.
My name is Darold Higa. My new title is actually senior game designer right now. So I'm actually working on that stuff. I was in the production team as well. I'm at Wargaming at Chicago, Baltimore as well. I've worked at a lot of different places. I've worked on free-to-play, I think games like Ebony. I've also worked at a studio that used to work with the U.S. Army, so we did a bunch of simulators. So those are titles you've probably never seen, so that's always kind of sad to me. But including an RPG teaching how to negotiate, how to not shoot, called JFETs, and called Elect, and then a artillery holodeck type simulator called JFETs. And I also worked at a publisher, small publisher. So.
Cheers! Very cool. Frank, can you share when you knew that video games wasn't just going to be a hobby? How did you know that it was the career for you? Because we have a lot of gamers that have the idea of, I love the games, I know them inside and out, maybe I should pursue a career in video games. Did you always know, or was it something that came out of nowhere?
It was something that I kind of fell into. Like, I always played video games, but my passion was illustration and drawing. And so I went to the University of Illinois for civil engineering, and didn't really want to do civil engineering, and so I got a degree in art. I got my bachelor's in art there. After college, I was working, doing some graphic design stuff for a company, and just trying to get into the comics industry, trying to get into animation. I applied at Walt Disney multiple times, any place I could try to get into, working on my skills. And I had a friend who had a friend who worked at Bungie. Bungie is famous for making Halo, right? Mm-hmm. This was back when. And they were in Chicago. And they were looking for an animator at the time, and I was teaching myself 3D. So I put together a quick portfolio, came up to Chicago, interviewed, walked in the door, and there was lots of, it's a game company, lots of guys just hanging around, making video games. They had like bagels and stuff. It was amazing. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do. And so I had another interview there, but I did not get in. And so that really stoked a fire under me. It's like, this is what I want to do. I could totally see myself doing this job. And so that's all I did for 6 months. All I did was work on my portfolio, and I worked part-time at work. And then I spammed everybody to try to get in. And oddly enough, I ended up in the same place I was living, which is Champaign. Champaign, Illinois is the home of Volition and the University of Illinois. So it was kind of weird.
I really like how I picked up on how you said, I felt the fire, and so for the next 6 months, all I did was work on my portfolio and work my part-time job. Like, I really picked up on that fire you had and that decision right then in that moment to say, okay, I didn't get that interview, but I'm gonna polish and pursue. I really like that. JJ, was it always in your field of vision, or did it happen crazily?
No, so for me, I'm obviously the newest one here, if you will, to the industry, and I actually went to college for video game design. I teach at DePaul now, so I have to plug their program, but I also went there. And so they have you can get a degree in computer games now, and I did that. So I was always interested in games, from a young age, as I'm sure everybody here was. And so I was like, oh, well, this is basically all I ever think about, so I might as well see if they'll pay me money to do it. And it turns out that they will. So I went to college, and I got a degree in video games, and then I got an internship, and that kind of led my way into the industry. So I started in mobile games, and now I work at Wargaming.
May I ask that part that you said quickly about you got an internship? How did you? So
the internship, man, let me tell you, as somebody who is teaching at a school, and so I have students that I tell this all the time to, if you're looking for a job, and this isn't video game specific, but internships are a huge deal. So I actually have a similar story to Frank in that I just wrote emails to everybody who had an email on their website, and I asked every single game company I could find, do you have any intern jobs? And all over the world, like any place that would take somebody who only speaks English, I was like, let's do it. And it turns out that also there was a company that made mobile games that was like 6 blocks from my house in Chicago, and so that's where I got my internship.
How lucky! It
was totally
fabulous. Wow, Darold, did you always know, or how did you come into it?
Yeah, so my path was a little bit weirder. So I was a college professor at the time, deciding that, boy, getting a tenure track position is actually quite difficult. I was interviewing and competing with other American candidates halfway around the world for university positions, because we tend to over create PhDs. So it was one of those things where, and I just happened to be working part-time as a QA tester at a game company. Yes, I was a professor and a QA tester at the same time. It was a very surreal year and a half for me. But basically during that time, I said, it's one of those things where, and this is something I'm probably going to hit on multiple times, but making games and playing games are two different things. And they're not exclusive, but you have to understand that they're not the same thing. And so I always liked playing games. I wasn't sure if I was going to like making games. And as it turns out, being exposed to it so I advocate sort of the QA route, right? It's not guaranteed, it's not easy, it takes a long time. It's not like an instant kind of thing. But by being on the QA side, I got to touch the product, and be sort of the consumer's last line of defense.
Darold, for anyone that doesn't know, what's QA?
Oh, sorry, quality assurance. So you're basically the testing team, that gets builds in different states, and you're basically certifying to say that yes, this is either maybe not bug-free, but at least we've addressed bug A or bug C or bug D, and that's sort of what QA does. And so that's the route that I took into the industry. But again, I was in a totally different career. College professor, I guess this definitely counts as a different career. And I decided to change because I was having a lot better time making games than I was like teaching. Not that I don't like teaching, but.
Me too, Darold. He and I have a lot in common. I had no idea that games was going to be a part of my career. In fact, I was a horseback riding instructor. Before that, I cleaned stalls as a 12-year-old and cleaned water tanks to make money to pay for horseback riding lessons. That gave me those skills. And then I was a banker. I was a teller, and I worked my way up to management. I had a 5-year career in banking. And it was during that time that I was trying to heal from the things that we've all been through with either violence or bullying or trauma or what have you. And it was games. It was back in 2002 where I had lost trust in the world. I couldn't walk my dog or go to the grocery store. I was terrified. But playing Final Fantasy XI is actually what helped me find my voice again, because I was able to meet people in a safe way, in a way that I didn't feel, traumatized. So I played Final Fantasy XI every night, while going. I would go to my banking job, and I would go, take my classes, and I was in college and all that stuff, and I would play, and it really helped me become whole again. And after that, after I played for so many years, I had the idea for holders. I wanted to spotlight a female gamer in tech and meeting hackers and new AI, artificial intelligence, and all of that. So it was foreign to me, the idea of working in games, but I started, my first paid gig in games was I just reached out, like they said, to online gaming websites and offered to write for them, because I was an English major and I loved to write, and I was writing books and all that. And sure enough, like you said, someone responded. It was mmorpg.com, which is a huge online video game website, one of the biggest. And they said, yeah, we actually like the idea of having an author or writer have a different perspective, change it up, not just a only soul-core gamer. So, I got $20, for every column. It's not much, it doesn't pay the rent, but it's for your resume. All of a sudden you have a credit for writing for a game website, and that's where it begins. So I really like that you can go in all these different avenues, and there's a way to break in all these different ways. JJ, why don't you start us off with describing the unique opportunities that are sometimes overlooked in video games? It's kind of like the movie world, where you think of an actor, but you forget, the location managers and the cinematographers and all the people that help make a movie. Well, there's all these different departments that help make a game.
Absolutely, yeah. There's definitely a ton of opportunities in games to writing is a good example of something where it's if you're not super technically skilled, you can do writing and submit that to people or consult. I think actually another great thing is something that Darold has done is the serious games, which serious with a capital S, which I think a lot of people don't know about or don't have a lot of insight into because they aren't advertised really, because they're industry specific. So what serious games are is they fall into a couple categories, but generally they are simulations that are done for, as Darold did, the military, or there's hospitals that use them to teach people how to do surgery or how different processes work. There's also firefighting and police simulators for different aspects of their careers. And actually there's a studio in the Chicago area called High Voltage Software. They make a lot of entertainment games, but they also have a big serious games division. And then the other half of serious games is something that's called Games for Change, and these are smaller games that are usually you don't buy, but they're for free on the internet or for some kind of social purpose. These are games that their goal is to kind of give somebody information about something that is a social cause, whether it be some kind of we want to bring information about a specific disease or how these people's experience is, or something there's a lot of garbage in the ocean and we're going to make a game about how that affects the planet, stuff like that. So there's kind of this whole other section besides entertainment that exists for games that people can kind of get into that don't necessarily have all of the kind of flash flashy attention that regular video games
I love that. Look up Jane McGonigal, right? Jane McGonigal, incredible game designer, creating games that help solve real world problems. Another thing, Frank, I'd like you to comment on is the aspect that Valve is a game company that hires psychologists to interview their gamers and to think about what excites gamers, what bores gamers. I never would have thought, 10 years ago that I could get a psychology profession and work in games. Can you comment too on how there's just accountants or different types of avenues in games you don't think of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the stuff that I am most familiar with is, of course, on the art side. Usually when I tell people that I'm an artist for games, they look at me and say, so you're an animator? There's lots and lots of more varied artistic paths within video games. So if there are a few people out there who are interested in getting into games, but you're not interested in potentially like building characters or building environments, the stuff that's pretty obvious in front of you, there are other ways to do it. So like if you have graphic design skills, the user interface is another method to get into it. Another thing that I don't think people are aware of, but lighting. We have specific lighting artists, and they're dedicated, and that's what they do. On smaller games, of course, it's going to change depending on your team size. The larger your team, the more and more specialization you're going to get, and the more and more different opportunities for like psychologists in the game. We have, I kind of wanted to jump on that a little bit. We have a user research team. And so what they do is they bring in people and they have them test the game. It's not just testing, they apply a scientific background to how they get the data and how they analyze the data. And so like the designers will be asking for specific questions on the gameplay or how we're presenting things, and if they're actually aware of what the designers want. And so that is another way to get into games.
I love that.
Yeah, I think sorry. The other thing I thought of too is if you like games and you want to be in the game industry but you don't want to make games, games are still businesses, and I think a lot of people forget that. So like every business has a bunch of requirements that it needs. It needs lawyers, it needs accountants, it needs like managerial people to like manage the space, all of these types of jobs, or like hospitality type things, where if that's what you're interested in, like, oh, I really want to be a lawyer. I went to college with a guy who became a lawyer, but he really loved video games, and so he's like a video game lawyer, and he works, I think he works for like EA now, yeah, so, sorry.
I caught that.
That's
I
an
caught
EA
it. It was subtle, but I
okay.
caught it. Darold, this Twitter question is for you. Thank you so much for your Twitter questions. Darold, can you describe your opinion on indie studios and indie games, such as Undertale, One Shot, or the such, and the difference between a AAA studio and an indie studio?
Sure. I think there's a fundamental difference. One thing that you're going to have to recognize off the bat is that these are based on different business models, and I think, and I'm going to be the guy who says it, indie games are still a business, right? If you don't make money, you're not going to be able to make the next game, right? So, and if you're really interested in that it is, you're building an engine, if you like board games, you're building an engine to build your next game, right? So you have to build a mechanism to do that. So, but the difference is the businesses are structured very, very differently. So if you work on a AAA title, be prepared for the fact that A, you're going to be a cog in a rather large machine, but B, also understand that the amount of capital at risk is enormous. So if you wonder why a lot of these games don't take a lot of chances and are not very innovative, it's because there's a lot of money at risk and they have to appeal to a very, very broad audience. Now the advantage of an indie game developer is that you can take a lot of risk, but understand that you might not be very successful. One of the programs I used to work with, Lucas Pope, which you might recognize from, like Papers, Please. I remember when he did his first indie title, because he and his wife, made several indie games before Papers, Please, and they did not. I mean, they did okay, but they didn't sell a lot, and they were literally working out of, his wife's, parents' basement. Well, it's not a basement because it's Japan, but working out of their house, to try to make ends meet. And then Papers, Please, of course, now a huge success. So that's great. But and he could write a game that was very tailored to his audience and to his taste. But and he could take a lot of risks. But for every one success, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of games that are not successes. And so when you see a big title, understand that that's a lot of capital. It's like basically the fortunes of hundreds, if not thousands, of people are resting on that title. So that's why you see a big difference in sort of the way that those businesses are structured and the way they make games.
And I picked up on what you said, Darold, and what Frank, you said about how a big studio, the more specialization you'll have. Like if you notice, Frank said there's a lighter that are experts at lighting, and that's all they do every day. And I had a Call of Duty creator, he works for Activision, and he said that every day he created the crates and the barrels and the parts of the environment over and over. But he said, that's what I like. He said, I'm the type of personality that wants structure and routine and the same. He didn't want to have to wear many hats, and as an indie developer, you may have to step in and do a little bit of animation and then step in and do a little concept art. I'm imagining, right, Frank? I mean, as an artist, okay. So,
yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say I have experience as an indie developer, but I've been at Volition so long. We were independent before we were purchased by our publisher. This was back in THQ days. And so when I started, there was like 30, 40 people at the company, and you did do multiple things. Like I was an environment artist, and we lit our own levels. We put our own VFX in the levels and things like that. So you did do more.
Frank, this sort of question says, what helps inspire you when you're in a video game and you have a block or you're stuck? Anything inspire you as an artist?
Oh yeah, just working with other people. I know that sounds kind of funny, but like when you are surrounded by other people, other creatives, and you start getting stuck, you can always talk to them. You go, like I worked as an art director many times, and you have kind of a special relationship with your fellow artists in the studio. Like I could always go into the concept art room and talk to the concept art guys, and like, hey, what do you think about this? And then like they would come back with something. It's like, well, wow, that is something I would have never thought of.
That magic, I love that.
Right.
JJ, this question I'm going to throw to you. Can you describe applications, programs, or fields of study that are great for video games? I mean, you said you went to this particular computer game degree, which didn't exist, a while back, and so it's cool that you have choices now. Do you have to go back to school to work in video games? Does it help? What do you think?
No, so if you have not gone to college yet and you love video games and you're going to go to college anyway, I will say that it's a good place to do that because you get kind of a lot of hands-on experience without a ton of risk. You're in there, you can make little games during school, and that's very interesting. Of course, DePaul University has an excellent program. And but no, you don't have to go back to school if you're past that, or you don't have to. You can make games, in your spare time. Certainly. As far as tools go, I mean, one of the most interesting things about making games kind of now is that the tools are rapidly becoming identical for professionals and hobbyists. You kind of have two big choices as far as like professional level tools that are free for anyone to use. There's two engines that do this. Unity game engine, which some people might have heard of, and the other one is Unreal. An Unreal Engine is made by Epic. They're the people who made Gears of War, a bunch of other stuff. But and so they both put out their engine for free. It's a robust, massive game engine that anybody can download for free, and professional studios use it and hobbyists use it. And if you're a hobbyist and you're really interested in making games, there's no barrier of entry anymore. You can download Unity. You can watch the videos, figure out how it all works, and then you can make your own game right now, today.
Does anybody know, I love that, I love it. Anybody know Wing Commander? Raise your hand if you know Wing Commander back in the 80s, right? Chris Roberts created that, and he's creating Star Citizen now. And what's interesting is that company will they will seek out and hire people who know CryEngine. So like if you have a specific skill in a specific program like CryEngine, you will be gobbled up. You will be hired immediately. So like think about how different studios Big companies like Blizzard, like if you find a specific thing that they use and you become the expert at it, and you are invaluable. Like right away, you will get a job. My niece told her father when she was like 10 years old that she wanted to be an artist, and he was a teacher, then he became a physician's assistant. And he said, no, I don't want you to be an artist. There's no stability. I don't want you to be a starving artist. I want you to do something corporate or a doctor or whatever. And my husband, who works in games, said, wait a second, Dave, wait. Before you squashed your girl's dreams of being an artist, just know, I worked for Blizzard for 8 years. They pay some of their specialized artists over $100,000 a year. Like, you can make money as an artist if you have done the work beforehand, if you have gone either to school or honed your craft or downloaded the engines and become the best ever. Like, you do the work beforehand and you will get a high-paying job. It's just a matter of being prepared and being professional and polite and proactive and easy to work with. Like, there are all these tiny little things that you also have to have in addition to the skill. Which, Darold, I do love how you comment on that being workable, being collaborative is essential. Can you expand on that?
Sure. Yeah, it's one thing that I always kind of work on is that, as a smart person, presumably if you're working in games, you're kind of a smart guy.
And pull the mic a little closer, because it's super loud back there.
Then you're a smart person. That's just the prerequisite. You also have to be a team member. Now, unless you're an indie person, like let's say you're an indie developer and you're a developer of one, well then you just have to be able to work with yourself, so that's fine. But in most cases when you're making a game, you're going to be working with at minimum 10 to 15 persons on your small team, or more likely with 200 to 500 people worldwide on a bigger game. So if you are, so you have to have the technical skills, but unfortunately that is just the bare minimum.
Right.
You also have to work on your ability to collaborate, and that has to be apparent too. Like if you do an interview and, maybe you have to practice doing your interviews as well, because you have to make sure that you communicate to the people who are interviewing you what kind of person you are, not just your technical skills.
I love that. This question is about writing for video games, and I'll tackle it since I have so much experience in that. It asked, how do you become a writer for games? And I really like this question because you can do so much of the work before you apply. And what I mean by that is you create writing samples that can fit into a game genre that you're interested in. So if you're interested in games that are FPS, first-person shooters, you play a lot of Call of Duty or what have you, and you want to write or create those storylines, what you want to do is you want to create several different samples, like a weapon design. So you would create a new weapon, decide what it does, and write out like what that looks like, and what that would sound like, and what kind of a carrier would carry that gun. You would want to write an environment, so you would want to design whether it's fantasy, if you want to work on World of Warcraft, or depending on the genre, and create who lives there, and the culture, and the traditions, and the religion, and all that kind of stuff. You would want to create a character, a species, again, depending on the genre, if it's human or fantasy, and write out what they do, who they are. So you can create this portfolio in whatever genre you want to work in video games, and like Frank said, work on it, hone it, give it to editors, talk to people, collaborate, get feedback. And that is the stepping stone, preparing, well, I guess scaling down first, deciding what genre, what kind of video game you want to work on, and then preparing that sample from there.
I mean, that's definitely true, just to add, for every position in the game design world. Like, if you are an artist, I mean, Frank can obviously talk about this more specifically, but as he said, like, if I want to make, characters, you should be, if you are truly like, I want to get into industry and do this, it's the same thing. Like, work on your characters at night, work on them on the weekends, make that portfolio, show them to people, for writing for games, for design, design components, design board games. I mean, I think, we're talking a lot about video games because we're all in that same industry, but I mean, you can design a whole game with just, a pencil and a sheet of paper. You don't have to have all these fancy tools or technical skills to just do, like, real core game design can be done. You can make imaginary games that have no pieces at all. Tag is a game, right? Football is a game. None of these, necessarily require a ton of equipment, and all of that can be honed and worked on, in your
I
nights and
love that.
weekends.
I love that. Darold or JJ or Frank, do you have any experience, or can you talk about this question about sound design in gaming? Can any of you comment on how you would become a sound designer or how important sound is for games? Jump on it. Someone jump on it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows the sound design guy. So, I mean, sound design is part of the art
That's
realm.
huge,
It's the
right?
same thing. I mean, sound design can be really similar in games as it is to film, in that sometimes when it's really the best, you don't notice it. Like, really excellent sound design kind of blends into the game and helps make you feel things that you're supposed to feel at certain times, or helps, you know, they start playing the battle music and everybody knows, and it's like, oh, this is the battle music, something bad's gonna happen. Or, you know, they have the different theme songs that help you kind of understand and navigate the game world with some additional audio. And sound design is the same thing. You can design sounds and you can design music and kind of put together a portfolio if that's something you want to do.
Frank, do you want to take this one about, besides requisite job skills, what other characteristics do you look for in job applicants?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I think we already touched on the collaboration aspect of it. That is huge. I can't say enough. Like, one of the big problems that we always run into is communication. Being able to work with other people is a big deal. Being able to write emails that actually make sense, that's a big deal, because you need to always be, as lucid as you can, especially with any type of direction.
I love that you brought that up, because actually, again, I know a lot about this because working with someone who works in games, I hear about all of the hiring processes, and he said that an applicant had to come in and write emails. They wanted to see how you communicated. So I love that he brought that up, because literally you guys need to be prepared to come into an interview and they said, hey, there's these tasks that need to be done today. How would you write that email to your coworker to ask to have that done? And it shows the kind of person you are by how you type.
And that's really, really super important, especially for quality assurance, because they are the ones who are going to be writing the bugs. And so they have to be really explicit and really careful in the way they word things, and be able to communicate properly.
I love that. There's one last story I want to share. Please start also raising your hands if you have the classic Q&A style raising your hands. I want to share how an applicant had no idea if he was going to get a shot in getting this job, but he met game developers by coming to a convention, just like you, and he came up afterward, he met everybody, and greeted everybody, got everybody's business cards, and talked a little bit, 5 seconds, about who he was, what he could offer. That's important, right? Knowing. A lot of times people will say, I want to work in games, and when they're asked, what part of games? They go, I don't know. And no, we can't help you, right, if you're not sure. So hone that down first. But he was able to say very quickly what he had done indie-wise, created his own games. Here was the samples, the links, he was ready. But then after they exchanged business cards, the developer said, well, if you're ever in, this was in Texas, well, if you're ever in California, in the studio, email me and call me and we'll have lunch. That doesn't sound necessarily like a job interview, right? Because he just said, if you're ever in the area, email me or call me and we'll have lunch. So what's cool is that the audience member grabbed that opportunity and said, you know what, there was good vibes, there was good energy, we got along right away, he had that offer, I'm gonna take it. So a month later, he emailed and said, hey, I'm gonna be in the area, which wasn't true, next month. Can we grab that lunch? Person said yes. So he booked a plane ticket for that month, on the hope, on the whim that it would happen. Oh God, I'm getting choked up because it's so cool. Like I just love the magic in that. And he went and they had their lunch and it turned into a whole afternoon interview where yes, they had lunch, but then the developer said, well, come and I'll have you meet our design team. And so we brought him to the studio and he met the design team, and because he was amiable and jovial and easy to work with, it turned into a job. But the point is that you're prepared and you take those opportunities to meet developers and grow it from there. I think that's awesome. It's so cool. All right, any classic yes, with the hands.
This is a question for Frank. So Volition has done like a lot of work in a lot of different genres, like red faction,
question?
Sure. The question is that at Volition we've done a variety of different games, and are there any design ideas that have crossed between the games? That's a really good and interesting question. And the only thing I could possibly think is yes. Like, of course, because we have like the same designers working on game to game, and even when we had multiple projects, designers, artists would get together and talk about, hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? Let's see. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's implement it like that. So yeah, I would have to say yes. I don't have any specific examples though. Although I kind of want to share something with you. We have something we call Awesome Week, and so Awesome Week it's kind of like focused play. So we have a week that's designated and like, hey, if you could make the game better, or what could you do for the game? Come up with ideas, implement them locally, and then at the end of the week, let's see what we have. And a lot of great ideas came out from there. And so it's just a bunch of people, they get together and they go, hey, this would be fun. I need a programmer, and then they hit the forums or they talk to their friends and they get people together, and lots of crazy ideas have come out from that. If you've ever played Saints Row, in one of our DLCs we've had dinosaurs, which doesn't make sense, and I believe that came from an Awesome Week, because somebody's like, hey, I'm gonna make a dinosaur and see if I can stick him in the game, and like got together with an animator, it was like an environment artist, and made a dinosaur and stuck him in, and it was just hilarious.
That is
So,
awesome. Darold, can you add to that about how game jams are another way to get involved, or local things are a way to get involved?
I'm probably
Sure,
a game
JJ,
jam person.
sure.
Yeah, game jam. If you don't know what a game jam is usually something like 1 to 3 days, but it can be like up to a week, where you decide, usually there's a theme like make games about the sky or something, and then everybody who's participating in this game jam has under a week to make a game that represents to them the sky or something, or jumping, maybe that's better. And so game jams, like it's a good way to take your ideas and just make something quick out of them that you can show other people. And there are internet game jams that happen really often. There's a website called itch.io, and they run a lot of game jams on all sorts of different themes all the time, and you just submit your game, you make your idea, you submit your game, and then they'll put it on the website and you can see it. There's something called Global Game Jam, which is in, I think, the end of January every year, and that is something that everybody can participate in. There's, we have people at DePaul who come, and there's also like you can go different parts of Chicago, there's just working spaces where you can get together, and everybody makes a game on the same theme. I believe last year was restoration. So it's really interesting to kind of look through, and you can make these games based on kind of whatever your ideas are.
There was a 16-year-old that got his internship from going to a game jam in St. Louis, creating a game based on the fish theme, and it totally snowballed into an internship. So that's a great, great opportunity. Did I miss any hands as I was looking around the room? In the very back? Yeah. Say that again. How do you get famous?
Become a famous YouTube gamer without being original whatsoever.
Oh, how do you?
I have no idea.
maybe that could be your thing, not being original.
I like that.
That's like free business for
Remember, start small. Every YouTube gamer, they started out just playing their favorite game and asking their friends, to join in and watch them. So start small, find a game or a genre that you like, and build from there. It can happen. I saw a hand over here. Yes.
For a question for you, for the stories, do specific companies look for specific genres for the stories?
For sure. So she asked, do specific companies look for specific genres of stories, right? I like that question because every game company is going to have a different way of telling stories and a different way of implementing them into the game. Some of them will be narrated by the protagonist. Some of them will have like a God view narrator. Some games have the lore that you can find within the game as the player, right? You find the scrolls and you find the stories. So really, writing really does have a vast number of opportunities as far as style goes, voice goes. the different dialogue back and forth between characters. The main thing is to have your samples ready depending on what genres you want to write, or if you want to cross genres, have all kinds of samples. But talk to me afterward. We'll go into a lengthy discussion on the difference between novel writing and short story.
And I do want to follow up on that because now that I'm sort of a narrative designer,
Yeah.
I'm going to say that one thing that you need to keep in mind is that if you're really comfortable only writing one genre, maybe focus on fiction writing, not game writing, because the one problem you're going to find with game development is what takes the writer about an hour to a day to write will take the rest of the team about 2 years to complete. So like if you write, someone was making a comment about like Half-Life 3, and yeah, so you can write a paragraph story and put it online and everyone goes, wow, I wish that was the game. Yeah, except that that's gonna take about 2 years for about 200 people to implement, right? So the pace that a writer writes and creates a mental image versus the rest of the team has to visualize and turn into gameplay, that scale is really, really different. So the writer has to be able to support many different hats. You have to not just be thinking of, oh, I write fantasy stories, but you have to, can I do dialogue? Oh, our studio has a team and a B team. One team is actually doing science fiction, or another team is actually doing a different type of story. So if you do want to go into writing in video games, you need to be flexible. And you also have to be able to not just write macro narratives, but you also have to be able to write dialogue. You have to be comfortable, and not necessarily that it will be implemented as is, because this is, again, especially if you're working on a big game, this is a group effort. So that's how.
And we're having such a challenge right now, scaling down our dialogue, because every line of dialogue, if it's voiceover, we have to pay the voice actors to read. And so trying to get to the heart of the story in 1 to 2 lines is so difficult. So again, like Darold said, you gotta be really flexible and imaginative and try to figure out, okay, how can we get there faster? It's always just a limited amount of time in games, a limited amount of design capability. So that's a really, really good point.
And writers need to be flexible. I've got a tiny anecdote about that.
Yeah.
Tiny anecdote. So I was the art director of Saints Row 2 and Saints Row 3. And in the cinematics, we created all of these different spaces for these cinematics. And then in Saints Row 3, we're like, man, we created too many spaces. We created that shoot store, and there's just a tiny cinematic in that. We're not doing that anymore. And that's why a lot of the cutscenes happen in this bar called the Broken Shillelagh. We just asked the writers, hey, please just put your stuff in this one place, so we don't have to make so much stuff. And then it kind of became a running joke in there too, like, oh, we're back. Why are we always in this crappy bar?
I love that. Something that restrictions can become the meat of your humor. Like, that's so awesome. Okay, we are pretty much almost out of time. So before I get your last question, can you please, Darold, tell us how we can find World of Tanks and play it and all the upcoming events?
So as it was my first kind of project as sort of a narrative, game narrative designer, we just released World of Tanks War Stories actually, this week. So it's basically, we've added a single player experience to World of Tanks, which is, typically a multiplayer only game. And so there's a whole bunch of stories, and we're using motion comics to introduce each chapter, and they're all alternative history because I am a sci-fi alternative history buff, so you can see my fingerprint on all of that. So we're telling a bunch of different war stories there, so that's where you'll see my work.
I love that.
And you can get World of Tanks on the Xbox and the PlayStation 4. It's free. That's our big deal. So, and also, Xbox 360.
Take that opportunity and get that game, and then you can come and talk to JJ and Darold about it. There's your in, right there. Frank, how can people follow Volition, and what do you have going on?
Sure. Well, we're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of those places. Probably the best place to check out Volition stuff is we stream weekly. Every week, Thursdays, we have a stream on Twitch. If you just search Volition stream, you'll find it. And that we have a fantastic community manager, Mike Watson and Josh Stinson. They stream every Thursday. And we play other games as well during our stream. And we've also had other game developers on our stream and talking about games. It's really a lot of fun to watch.
I will be at my booth A3 right next to the pumpkins, the Pumpkin Geek. So if you're walking through the artist alley, you see all these little pumpkins. I'm right next door. I'm his neighbor. Really cool pumpkins, by the way. You gotta see them. And I have 2 more panels tomorrow about villains, how to create a great villain, a great antagonist, and how to get published, how to make a living as an author, as a writer, as a novelist. So that'll be really cool. And I do want to get your questions, so you come up afterward. Anybody else that has questions, please come up. Round of applause for you guys. Round of applause for my panelists. Thank you so much.